think that ABC and the other networks should apologize for providing an uncritical forum for the administration to lay out their unsubstantiated claims of weapons of mass destruction.
I'm glad you phrased your question so nicely. No, I don't think an apology is due. If what you are saying is, could we all have been more critical? I think the answer is yes. I must tell you, I'm going to be responsive in behalf of NightLIne, over which I do have some control. We did do a 90-minute town hall meeting, the title of which was Why Now? And the essence of which was, where is the evidence that there is an immediate danger to the United States? Did we do enough programs like that? I concede we did not. But you know, that's a function of perhaps incompetence on my part, but certainly not ill will. And I will try and do better the next time, but I don't think I need to apologize for it.
A study of the 2 weeks around Colin Powell giving his address at the UN for war looked at the 4 major nightly newscasts: ABC, NBC, CBS, and the PBS NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Of the 393 interviews done around war, only 3 were with anti-war representatives. Now, this was at a time when about half the population was opposed to the invasion, wanting more inspections and diplomacy. Right. So that did not reflect mainstream America at all. No, but
you know, where is it written that it is a journalist's responsibility to go check the polls every day and see what mainstream America wants them to do?
But three of almost 400 interviews with anti-war representatives, that is so skewed to the pro-war voice.
Look, I agree with you, but I must ask you in return, what would you have looked to for evidence that there were no weapons of mass destruction? There was evidence in 1998 that those weapons of mass destruction not only existed, but were present in, just let me finish the point, not only existed, but were present in Iraq. It did not make logical sense that Saddam Hussein, whose armies had been defeated once before by the United States and the coalition, would be prepared to lose control over his country if all he had to do was say, all right, UN, come on in, check it out. I will show you, give you whatever evidence you want to have, let you interview whomever you want to interview. Logically, at that time, it seemed as though weapons of mass destruction. Did I believe at the time that there were weapons of mass destruction? Absolutely I did.
Well, let me look at September 2002. Bush and Blair have their news conference at Camp David. They say an IAEA report has just come out that alleges that Saddam Hussein will get nuclear weapons within 6 months. This was 6 months away from before the invasion.
Sure.
Almost no mainstream reporter in this country reported there was no such IAEA report.
I can take you back to 1990, for example, when the evidence from the CIA was that there was no indication that the Iraqis had any kind of a nuclear program. After the war, they found all kinds of evidence that they were much further along.
They were citing an IAEA report, and it didn't exist. And then what about Kamal Hussein, the son-in-law of Saddam Hussein?
Yes.
He said, he was quoted repeatedly by the press when they liked what he said, when he was anti-Saddam Hussein, when he said we destroyed the weapons of mass destruction after the Gulf War. Then the press did not pick up on this. I mean, it's these kinds of issues where the voices that they would cite for other issues.
I am saying to you, I mean, we can go around this as often as you like.
Let me ask a bigger question.
Well, if you're going to let me answer the first one before you ask me the next one. I am saying to you that it did not make any sense that Saddam Hussein would run the risk of being overthrown, of losing all the power that he had, if indeed in 2003 he had no weapons of mass destruction. Why in heaven's name did he not permit the kinds of inspections and the kinds of interviews that would have demonstrated that to the world's satisfaction? I'm not saying that now I believe there were weapons of mass destruction immediately before the war, but I can understand why our leaders and why many of us in the media were inclined to believe that at the time.
do you support the network's policy, ABC and the others, of putting military officials?
That's all right. Don't, but we'll do two more. Okay. Having asked for one question, you're now on your seventh.
And then I'll give you a book as a reward.
Thank you.
Do you support the networks, including ABC's policy of putting retired generals, other military officials on the payroll, yet not putting peace activists on the payroll?
Yes, I do.
Why?
I do, because I think there is a certain level of expertise that comes with having been, for example, a four-star general, or we have Richard Clark, let's say, is one of our paid consultants on ABC. I wish that we could go back to the days of, I guess about 10, 15 years ago, when it was network policy that we didn't pay anybody to come on and express his or her point of view. Unfortunately, we live in such a competitive environment today that everybody now expects to be paid. Why should a peace advocate expect to be paid for expressing a point of view without any, I mean, if you're talking about someone who has extraordinary expertise in a particular area, but you'd have to be a little more specific about who, for example, you had in mind.
The Pentagon would put out their point of view for free. Why pay one side? Because more often than not, the generals are commenting on whether we need to go from air war to ground troops moving in.
Once a general, I mean, my experience has been that once a general is out of uniform and no longer in the pay of the Pentagon, he is a little more free to discuss aspects of a policy than he was when he was within the Pentagon. But if what you're saying to me is, do I wish we no longer paid experts at all? You bet. I think everybody ought to come on television for free the way I've just done for you. All right?
But when you keep these kind of commentators on a regular basis, you end up with a pro-war because they're continually doing the play-by-play, and you don't have the manual.
On the contrary, I think, for example, and he's not one of our paid experts, but you have Wesley Clark, who quite clearly has opposed the war over the past few months.
Not quite clearly before the invasion.
Not quite clearly before the invasion. But again, I mean, you know, it's not necessarily always true that because someone is a four-star or was a four-star general, that he opposes or supports war.
But three of almost 400 interviews done around war being pro-war, that's a serious problem.
As you told me.